Hi there, my name is Cheryl Ball and I am the Training Development Manager at Now Group, and you're so welcome to our training session today. If you're not familiar with Now Group already, we are a social enterprise who support people with learning disabilities, learning difficulties and autism into jobs with the future. We're also the organisation behind the development of the Jam Card. So today's training session is going to be around supporting remote workers who are neurodivergent. The purpose of your training today will be for me to provide you with practical tips on how to support neurodivergent staff who are working remotely. By the end of this session today, hopefully you will be able to identify barriers to effective work practice for neurodivergent staff, recognise the needs of neurodivergent staff who are working remotely, and also understand how to support neurodivergent staff who are working remotely. So before we get into the detail, what is neurodiversity? This could be a new term for you. You may not have heard of this term before, but basically, neurodiversity refers to the different ways the brain can work and interpret information. It's a concept where neurological differences are respected and recognised as any other human variation. The neurological differences that we're talking about can refer to those who have been diagnosed with autism, ADHD, dyslexia, Dyscalculia, Dyspraxia, and Tourette Syndrome. So what are the benefits of a neurodiverse workforce? Quite often when we think about neurodiverse staff, we primarily focus on the things that they may struggle with, the things that they may find difficult, the things that they maybe can't do. And we don't focus enough on the benefits of having a neurodiverse workforce and what they can bring to your business or to your organization. And you'll see on the little diagram below some of those benefits, and these are just some. Innovation, so the ability to think outside of the box, to come up with ideas that are unique and different and creative that no one else would think of. Fine detail processing, the ability to see the detail that everyone else might miss. Creative ability, so exceptional skills around things like design, art, thinking, really important skills within any business and organization. We all need those creative people. Visionary thinking, so the ability to see the big picture, but not just the big picture, but also to be able to see the steps, the detail that will get you to that end goal. So that visionary thinking of where are we going and how do we get there? Strategic analysis. So we all need, again, people within our organizations who are strategic thinkers, who are detail thinkers, who like data, who like analyzing, who are logical thinkers. So that's really important for all of us to have a person like that within our team. Loyalty also. If a neurodiverse staff member is supported well within their workplace, they will be loyal to that particular employer. You'll also find that their timekeeping is really good and that they will be punctual and they will turn up on time and they will take their breaks on time and they probably won't go over their time on their breaks and things like that as well. So very loyal staff. And also lastly here is passion. You may have staff members who have a very specific and special interest and a very specific and special skill set, but they are hugely passionate about it and hugely enthusiastic about it and will do an excellent job in that key area because that's what they're really good at and that's what they're really passionate about. So there's loads of benefits to having a neurodiverse workforce, and this is not an exhaustive list by any means. So what we're going to look at now are the barriers. So this section will look at the barriers that prevent a neurodivergent employee from working effectively and successfully when working remotely. So working from home primarily. So here are some of the barriers. We'll look at them one by one. So a change in structure and routine. So your staff member may have found that structure and routine and a clear timetable and a clear schedule is very important to them. It brings them comfort to know what time they start, what time they stop, what time their breaks are at, what time things are happening at. And that's very, very important to them. So what that person will need is structure and routine when they're working remotely. Reduced access to managerial support. So the person may feel that because they're not in the office or the work environment, that they won't have access to their manager. They won't be able to go and ask them a question or ask them for support or reassurance when they need it. And so what the person will need in this instance is just reassurance that their manager will give them the support that's needed, that they will be able to call them if they have a problem, that the manager will check in with them on a regular basis and make sure that everything is okay. We'll go into these in more detail and we'll look at some, specific practical tips later on in the session. Lack of access to information can be another one. Sometimes things when working remotely take longer. It takes longer to get response to an email. It takes longer maybe to get information that we need come through from someone if we've asked for it. And this can be a little bit stressful and a little bit frustrating for some. But I think the key thing here is communication around that and reminding the person and letting the person know that the information is coming, but things are busy and it will be through at such and such a time or whatever it might be. But just make sure that there is communication around that and that they're reassured that they will get that information through. Another one can be social isolation too. So for some neurodivergent staff, working on their own, working remotely, may be the best scenario for them, and they actually will work really, really well on their own without distractions of people around them, without distractions of noise and things like that. It may suit a lot of people. But for others, it may make them feel like they are disconnected from the rest of the organization, that they are distant from people, that they're a little bit more isolated. And so what they will need is just connection with their colleagues and their manager, the people that they work with. And again, we'll look at that in more detail later on in the session. Other barriers can be distractions. So at home, they may be surrounded by things like the TV, phones, video games. There may be other people working in the house. There may be other people just in the house in general. There may be pets in the house. There may be distractions going on around them, noise, sensory issues, things like that that'll go on around them that they wouldn't normally have to deal with in the office. They may have a lack of a workspace, a specific workspace or a quiet space. And so I suppose helping the person to remove those distractions will be really important. Unexpected meetings. So random video calls on spec or random meetings. We're going to have a meeting in 2 minutes time or whatever, will not suit some people. They will find it stressful and they will find it frustrating. And then what will happen is they won't engage in the meeting because they won't feel that they have been prepared for it and that they've been ready for it. So that person will need a little bit of notice and will have need a bit more structure around meetings. New methods of communication. So obviously with working remotely, we're communicating in different ways now. We're using video calls, we're using things like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and for some that's a big change, and face-to-face video calls will not suit all. So we may need to think around how you communicate with a specific individual. Are they happy to do video calls? If not, how else can you communicate? Is it through a phone call? Is it text, email, whatever it might be? Another one then is reasonable adjustments. So that person in the office space may have had specific reasonable adjustments in place, which are now no longer in place at home. They may still need reasonable adjustments when working from home, but they may be different to what they were when they were in the office. And so they may need to have a conversation with you or you have a conversation with them around how they can be supported when they're working remotely and what you can do to be able to help them with that and what adjustments you can make to ensure that they reach their full potential. And the last one here really with the barriers is other conditions. So some neurodivergent staff may be dealing with other conditions. For example, it could be something like OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. It could be something like an eating disorder. And so we have to bear in mind that when working from home or working remotely, that these things can be exaggerated And so we have to make sure that staff are getting the mental and emotional support that they need as well. And as I say, we'll go into those practical ways of helping in those situations in a moment or two. Before we go into those specific practical tips, in general, how can we support neurodivergent staff or neurodivergent employees? Well, there's 3 really easy steps here that we can recommend. And we use this little acronym, which is go with your gut, G-U-T. And the G stands for give. Give the person time and patience. They're going into a different working environment. There's lots of changes going on. They will need some time and you will need to be patient and just give them that time that they need to adjust to everything that's going on around them. The second thing is understand their way of thinking. So like we've said, there are neurological differences. And so a good way of kind of, I suppose, finding out what they need and how to support them is to try and understand their thought processes, understand their way of thinking, put yourself in their shoes and kind of ask them questions, even if you need to just try and get inside their mind and what their thoughts might be. And then the third thing is to take time to make adjustments. Ask them, how can I help you? How can we support you? What do you need? And then if they need reasonable adjustments put in place, you can do that for them. So 3 really easy steps. Give time and patience, understand their way of thinking, and take time to make the adjustments. It's really, really simple, but really effective. So now that we have established the barriers our employees may be facing and what their needs might be, we can now identify how we can support them in practical ways. So here are some practical tips for you to take forward. Establish structured daily check-ins. So for those people who really like routine and really like structure, put check-ins in place. Put in there what time the check-ins are going to happen, who it's going to happen with, how often it's going to be, and that will also help them with that feeling of connection, but it will also help with that feeling of routine and structure that they need in their day. Establish rules of engagement, and that kind of falls into that first one also of structured daily check-ins. Establish those rules of engagement. When are you going to have those conversations? Maybe as a manager, speak to them about when you're going to check in with them or when they're going to check in with you. How will that happen? Will it be via a video call? Will it be via a phone call? What suits that person best in terms of communication? How often is that going to happen? So establish your daily check-ins and establish the rules of engagement. Provide opportunities for remote social interaction. So for those colleagues of yours who are struggling with working from home and who are feeling a little bit more lonely and isolated, it's good to kind of do some social interaction as well as just around work. So things like virtual quizzes, things like virtual coffee meetings, things like that. Put a buddy system even in place. So if it's someone who doesn't like groups, maybe you could just set them up with a buddy who could look after them, check in with them, meet on a daily basis for a 15-minute coffee and a chat. Even if it's over the phone, it doesn't have to be on camera, but just provide some kind of opportunities for that social interaction to still occur. Encourage emotional support. So like I said, some of your staff may be dealing with other things at home. They may be dealing with other conditions. They may be dealing with social situations or environmental situations. It could be domestic abuse at home, all sorts of things. So encourage that person to let you know if they are feeling like they need to have, emotional support, and put things in place, whether it's things like mental health training, counselling services, buddy systems, as I say, so that they feel like they have someone to talk to. But just make sure that you encourage that emotional support that is needed. Another one here is around communication, and this is just really a practical one, and it's kind of a fun one, but for some, text messages and emails can be hard to interpret in terms of the tone or how they're meant. And so using things like animated GIFs can really communicate emotion really well. So an excited GIF or a happy GIF or thank goodness it's Friday GIF or whatever it might be. But that can be really useful in communicating emotion behind the message. So just something to think about when you're maybe writing messages to someone maybe who is neurodivergent. That might be a helpful way to communicate. Another one here then is to encourage regular breaks. So that person, because they are at home, may not associate taking breaks with being at home. They will associate that with work. And so you may need to encourage that person or remind that person that actually they can still take a lunch break and they can still take tea breaks and that they can go out for a walk or take a little bit of downtime if it's needed, but really encourage those regular breaks, because if they're not in the office environment, they may not think to take breaks or put that into their structure. And it may be a case of you as a manager or a colleague or whatever helping them put that structure in place in terms of a daily schedule. So these are the times that the daily check-ins happen. These are the times that you take your tea break. This is the time that you take your lunch break, and actually putting that into a schedule for them if that is what is going to work for that particular individual. Another one here is support transitions to new communication platforms. So obviously, if we're going to be working from home, we're going to be using things probably like video calls and new systems and IT systems and things that maybe we weren't using before. So it's really beneficial just to have a little bit of time and patience with getting people set up on those and ensuring that they get the support that they need and figuring out how to use them effectively so that they remain communicated with the rest of the team and with the rest of the organisation. So just taking extra time and patience and support in getting people set up with those new communication platforms. Communication around policy or around sick pay policy is really important also, because like I said, with the break times, it can be the same with sickness as well. Is if someone is working at home and they are ill, they may continue to work through the illness because they don't associate it with being at work because they're not in the office. So if they were working in the office and they were feeling ill, they'd be like, I can go home because I'm sick. But if they're already at home, they may not stop working. So you need to communicate clearly that if someone is feeling ill or they're feeling unwell, just because they're working at home does not mean that they can't take the time off. So communicate your policy around your sick pay, etc., really clearly. Be flexible around your breaks and things like that. As I say, you may have people who are dealing with other conditions. They may have OCD, they may have an eating disorder, or it may just be that someone likes to take their breaks at specific times in the day, and they're very, they're very keen on keeping that routine. And so you may have to be a bit flexible in terms of people taking their breaks and things like that. They may need to go to the shops at a specific time to get their groceries or whatever it might be, and they may not want to waver from that. So you may have to be flexible and work with your employee in terms of scheduling and breaks and things. Communication is really key across the board. Communicate clearly, keep it clear, keep it concise, keep it short, keep it direct. I'd say probably and give people instruction on what you want them to do, not what you want them to not do, because that can be confusing at times. So communicate very clearly what you want someone to do. I would also say if there are changes being made and things are different and changes are taking place, the key thing is to communicate the change really clearly and in advance so that the person knows what to expect, but also to reassure them about what stays the same. So for your neurodivergent staff members, specifically maybe more for someone with autism, it will be really reassuring for them if you tell them what is going to stay the same. So for example, it may be, okay, we're going to have our meeting at a different time now. We normally have it at 10 o'clock. We're now going to start, since we're all working at home, we're going to do it at 11 o'clock. But we're still going to talk about X, Y, and Z. Everyone who is normally there is going to be there, etc., etc. So maybe reassure about the things that are going to be the same, because that brings comfort and reassurance. Changes to reasonable adjustments. So as I said, some may have had reasonable adjustments in the office or in the workplace. And so they may then need different reasonable adjustments in the home working environment. So it may be good to have a conversation around that and speak to the employee and see about, if they need extra support, if they need changes to be made, do they want to communicate in a different way? Do they need to take longer breaks, or do they need to take their breaks at a different time? Do they need particular software? to work at home, you know, there's different things that you can put in place, and so reasonable adjustments do not have to be expensive or cost a lot. They can be very, very small things that can make a huge difference to somebody. But I think the best way to decide what reasonable adjustments are made is to have a conversation with the person and ask them, what can we do to help support you? And what can we do to ensure that you're comfortable working at home and that you can reach your full potential? And I think also ensure that they are supported by their colleagues. So, like I say, it may work to put a buddy system in place where there's someone who can check in with them regularly, make sure that they're okay, have some coffee with them via a virtual call or a phone call or whatever it might be. But just ensure that you know, that they're feeling well supported by the people that they work with. So hopefully all of those practical tips will have helped. I'm hoping now by the end of this session that we have identified any barriers that may get in the way of effective work practice. We may hopefully now recognise the needs of neurodivergent staff who are working remotely. So we've identified those barriers, but also we now recognise what they need in order to break those barriers down. And hopefully now you also understand how to support neurodivergent staff who are working remotely. So we talked about that acronym GUT, you know, give, time and patience, understand their way of thinking, and then, you know, take the time to make the adjustments that are necessary. But we thought we've also looked at some of those really practical ways, like using GIFs when communicating, being flexible with break times, scheduling in, you know, daily check-ins, all of those sorts of things. So there should be some practical tips there that will help you as well. So that brings us to the end of the session today. I hope that you find that information helpful. You'll see on the slide here my contact details. If you would like any more training with my group, jam card training, neurodiversity in the workplace, or you would just maybe like some more advice about the things that we talked about in the session today, then please do not hesitate to contact me, or even if you just want more information or advice about what Now Group do and the services that we provide to those people with learning difficulties and autism, I would be more than happy to give you any information that you need. Please feel free to contact me. So that is the end of our session today. Hopefully you find it useful. Hopefully you can put some of those practical tips in practice. And you can, you know, help support your neurodivergent employees and colleagues in a better way. So thanks for coming, thanks for listening, and I'll see you again.